I'm sitting here with my colleague Amir Tibon, Haaretz's diplomatic correspondent. Hi, Amir.
Hi, Maya.
And retired Major General Noam Tibon, his father. Amir and Noam have probably told their October 7th story hundreds of times since that Saturday morning when Amir, his wife, and two young daughters locked themselves in their safe room in their home in kibbutz Nahal Oz as Hamas terrorists went from house to house in the kibbutz. While the Tibons' story is unique, Amir had the fortune of being rescued by his father and the brave soldiers who joined him on his mission. They were both among the first to say, although there were many heroes on October 7th, Israel as a country failed us. So, I want to start with you, Noam. Did you realize that right away when you got the call from Amir, made your way south? Did you feel how bad the country has failed us, or did it settle in?
I got the first text from Amir when I finished my swimming in the Mediterranean Sea here in Tel Aviv. And basically it said, that there are terrorists in the neighborhood in Nahal Oz. And then basically I tried to call, the chief of staff, the southern commander, and others whom I know from my military background. And 10 minutes later, when I was home changing, I got a gut feeling that I need to go there. Usually, as a military general, I always trusted the IDF to solve any problem. And on that day, I got a gut feeling who basically said, you have to go there. I cannot explain it. But I'm glad that I listened to my heart and went to the south, because basically on that day, the Hamas occupy most of the Gaza envelope. And the military failed to protect our kibbutzim, moshavim, ofakim, sderot, and this was the mission of my life.
Amir, did you realize that?
Kibbutz Nahal Oz, the community that I'm a part of, is the closest community in Israel to Gaza. And for 70 years, it has sat directly on the border. And throughout the decades, there were always security challenges. The first mortar was launched at the kibbutz in the 1950s, and there were ambushes in the fields of the kibbutz and landmines, and later there was the first intifada and the second intifada. The first Qassam rocket was fired at the kibbutz in 2001. But one thing never, ever happened before. In 70 years of history, a terrorist had never stepped foot inside kibbutz Nahal Oz. And I think something that both my father, from his perspective, and our little family from our situation where we had terrorists firing into our house, we realized that if the terrorists are inside the kibbutz, something that has never happened before, it means the defense lines of Israel have been breached. This is something that is not supposed to happen.
Absolutely. And I watched you on 60 Minutes. That was about a month after.
Even less. Everything happened very fast.
Right.
Yeah.
Seemed like a month, but probably was 10 days. And you were talking about the hostages and how that has to be our main mission.
Yes.
This was when still all hostages were still in Gaza. 5 months later, did you think we would still be talking about bringing back the hostages?
No. In my community, 7 people were kidnapped by Hamas, all of them civilians. 5 were released in the deal that President Biden orchestrated together with Qatar and Egypt, in November. Basically all the women and the girls, because in our kibbutz, it's important to remember, Hamas kidnapped an 8-year-old and a 15-year-old, 2 sisters. So all of the women and the girls have been returned alive to our community. And we still have 2 fathers, husbands, friends, neighbors, Omri and Tzachi, both in their 40s, civilians, who are still held in the hands of Hamas in Gaza. And I think it is unacceptable, and yet we live with it every day. This is something that has to be solved. And I do want to applaud President Biden for making it the #1 priority right now, to bring back these hostages alive. This is the #1 test for Israel and frankly for humanity. We need these people back with us, alive with their families.
Did you notice from the beginning that it has become the priority of the US government, but maybe not so much the Israeli government?
We had an interesting test case of that in our community because 2 of the hostages in Nahal Oz were US citizens, and their relatives in the community told us all the time, President Biden has spoken with us personally on the phone more than once, and we haven't heard a word from Netanyahu or anyone in his government.
Yeah. Did you think you would still be away from your homes 5 months
Yeah,
after?
and this is not a surprise. We hope to come back home. We are working on it. We are raising money for the repair of the kibbutz and the reconstruction of it, but it will take time. It's a very difficult mission, and it will take time. We need to be patient about that part.
Yeah. Do you still live as a community in some ways?
We basically, all of our community had been evacuated to a kibbutz near Haifa, kibbutz Mishmar HaEmek. They've been hosting us since October 8 with amazing generosity, and we're still mostly together. A few here and there people went to other places, but most of the community is there, and we're waiting to see what comes out of the war and when it will be possible to go back.
Yeah. Noam, maybe as a former commander of the Northern Formation, you can say, did you expect that we would have pretty much the same situation for the people living on the northern border and what we can expect there?
Yes, because one of the terrible things that happened to the state of Israel on October 7, that our neighbors, the Arab, basically saw the failure of the government, the failure of the military, and they are not afraid from us. Our deterrence broke to pieces. And that's why Hezbollah feel comfortable to basically, in very limited resources, to evacuate all the northern people in the state of Israel. And the government has no solution to it. I believe that the American initiative that President Biden put on the table, which include solution for Gaza, bring back the hostages, solution for the North, and more important than this, strategic relationship between the US, Israel, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and the Gulf countries. This is very important, and I think this can be a very good start to solve the issue of the North. But if it will not work, then Israel need to practice, be ready, and then to attack southern Lebanon. I served there many years in order that our citizens can live peacefully with security at home in the south and, yes, in the north as well.
This is a question for both of you. I was thinking in the last few weeks we've seen how the protests we have usually on Saturday nights, the protest to bring back the hostages and the more political protest to bring down the government. And in the last few weeks, they have in some ways merged, while some people still want them to be separate. Do you feel like it is now more of the same fight?
I understand why the families of the hostages don't want the two protests to officially merge and become one, and I think it's important to respect it. But I do believe that without significant public pressure on the government, it will be more difficult to bring back the hostages. I also think there has to be very significant pressure, obviously, on Hamas, and I think it's important to put pressure on Qatar, because it is the one country that has the most influence on Hamas. But I'm not naive about the fact that there are also political interests on our side, and that public pressure, whether it's through these demonstrations on Saturday night or other mechanisms, is very important right now, because we do have an opportunity. The administration is pushing, and it has put on a reasonable formula for all sides for a hostage deal, and I think it will be a terrible mistake if we don't move forward with it.
On October 8th, in the morning, I basically said that everyone that in charge of this failure, the biggest failure of the history of the State of Israel, this is the day that we lost more Jews than any other day since the Holocaust, need to go away. And I mean all the leadership of the IDF, which basically took responsibility, and I know that they will go. All the leadership of the Shabak, the same, they took responsibility. And all the government of Israel, and the first one who need to take responsibility and go home is Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister. I believe that Benjamin Netanyahu is personally in charge of this failure. He was the one which basically developed that Hamas is an asset. He was the one that in charge that all the billions of dollars came from Qatar to the hand of the Hamas, which basically transferred himself from a terror organization to a strong military force. And it's still actual today. Benjamin Netanyahu should go away as soon as possible. Even President Biden said it this morning, that today Netanyahu is hurting the state of Israel. I believe that Benjamin Netanyahu basically put those hostages as a political card, which is unacceptable. It's human life. We will not win the war without bringing them home. We will not win the war. And once it's a political card between Benjamin Netanyahu and all the most extreme parts in the Israeli society, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, this is very, very dangerous, because a country which is not taking care of citizens is not a good country. And we are going to fight. We are going to fight on those two fronts. Number one, to bring the hostages home. Everyone that is still alive. That's why I said to bring them home alive. And number two, to have an open election in Israel as soon as possible, and to bring the right leadership to the state of Israel.
Thank you,
Thank
both.
you. Thank you, Maya, and to our friends at UCLA.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel on the impact of October 7th on Israeli society and politics. I'm Allison Kaplan Sommer. I'm a journalist at Haaretz, and I'm the host of the Haaretz podcast. So much has changed in Israel since October 7th that it has become a popular culture cliche. You hear it everywhere. Ugh, that way of thinking is so October 6th. The fact that this has happened just goes to show that despite the fact that these attacks occurred 5 months ago, and the fact that Israel is still fighting the war, we still have trouble incorporating everything that has changed and transformed into our current reality. And so we are continually pointing that out to each other. The shocking events of the 7th and the subsequent developments, just to name a few, the war, the toll it's taking on Israel, the hostage saga, and the devastating situation for Palestinian civilians in Gaza, and the transformation of Israel's relationship with the rest of the world, continues to change and evolve every day. We're lucky to be able to have gathered this panel, which includes a diverse number of people with experiences and perspectives, to discuss these changes and what they mean. I'll introduce the panelists now. First, Ahmad Tibi, who has been a member of Knesset since 1999. He's the most senior and the most famous Palestinian citizen of Israel in the country's parliament. He leads the Ta'al party, which he co-founded, coming to politics after training and practicing medicine and serving as advisor to late Palestinian President Yasser Arafat for 7 years. Maoz Inon is an Israeli social entrepreneur and peace activist who has founded several successful tourism initiatives and most prominently the Abraham Hostels. His parents were killed when a rocket hit their house in Moshav Netiv Hasara on October 7th. Since then, he has become especially prominent, speaking out against the war in Gaza and calling for a ceasefire. To my right, Moran Zer Katzenstein is the founder and leader of Bonot Alternativa, a grassroots organization for women's rights and gender equality organizations. The handmade costumes they wore at the demonstrations became an emblem of the massive wave of protests against the government's judicial overhaul last year. Since October 7th, her group has pivoted to addressing the emergency needs of evacuees and their families. I'll begin the panel by asking these 3 panelists to share their personal reflections on what has changed for them since the 7th of October and what has changed, in their opinion, in the country that they live in, and whether they see these changes as long-term and permanent, or whether they believe with time they think that Israel will go back to resembling what it was on October 6th. After they speak, I'll turn to my 4th panelist, Haaretz columnist and opinion writer Ravit Hecht, who will map out what she sees as the significant changes across the Israeli political map since October 7th. And in the remaining time of the panel, hopefully there will be remaining time, I'll ask my panelists to respond to what they've heard from their counterparts and ask some follow-up questions. So to get started, I'll begin with Maoz Inon, who has perhaps experienced the most personally traumatic effects imaginable from the war. Given the terrible loss of your parents, it seems trite to ask you, but I will anyway. How has Israel changed for you and generally changed since October 7th?
Hi, Allison, and all the panelists. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here with you today. First, I'll start that my life completely changed, and the life of my family. We are 5 brothers and sisters, 11 grandchildren, and we lost our beloved parents and grandparents that were very much involved with each one of us life, very supportive, and just the most amazing people and parents I could ever ask. And losing them and so many of my neighbors, childhood friends, their parents, children that were killed or took as hostage to Gaza. It's a personal and community and national trauma. And from this trauma, what I've been doing basically ever since October the 7th, first I'm calling not to revenge. I don't want my parents be murdered and dying to be revenge by any means, because there is no hope in revenging. There is no hope in killing civilians, and there is no hope in continuing the cycle of death, bloodshed, fear that has been going on for over a century. And what I've been doing since October the 7th, I've been making hope. This I learned my Palestinian peace activist who mentioned that hope is not something we see, that's not something we find or being given. Hope is an action, something we're making. So I'm making hope. I was doing it in Geneva with 70 Israelis and Palestinians last week. I was doing it in Cyprus with 20 Israelis, Palestinian, and people from all over the region. I'm doing it with Israelis, I'm doing it with Palestinian, I'm doing it with international community, making hope together. And this is the only reason to continue. And I want my parents' sacrifice and our family sacrifice to be that they will be victims of peace and not victims of war. And I have the privilege to say that this trauma is also an opportunity. It's an opportunity to bring this never-ending conflict to an end. And only by diplomatic solution will be able to deliver security and safety to all those living between the river and the sea, and to create a future, a better future for all of us. And we must do it. No one else. We are the leaders. It won't come from the international leaders. It won't come from the Israeli politician or those who are in the government, and not from those who are leading at the moment the Palestinian people. It will come from activists. It will come bottom up from grassroots efforts that will match the international efforts to end the Israel-Palestinian conflict once and for all. And this is an opportunity, and this is what I'm decided to dedicate my life for.
Member of Knesset Tibi, you hear the idealistic words of a peace activist who has paid a horrible price in this war. When you hear these words, do you hold his optimistic vision? Do you think that it has a place? And just please address for us kind of the position of Palestinian citizens of Israel who are in a very, very difficult position in this situation.
Thank you. My friend Maoz is very courageous. I remember when I called him 2 days after your family was killed in October the 7th. And he was much more stronger than those who called him. He said, come to us, Ahmad. Our family is family of peace and tolerance, and we want to continue on. But Maoz in these days is unique, and he is not a widespread phenomena. He is outstanding, but the general atmosphere is much more tough and difficult. The Israeli society went far to the right, even that the reality went to the left. Why I'm saying so? Because the post-traumatic event in the Israeli society send the right wing much more right, send those in the center and the left to the right again. I heard words and ideas and actions from leftists that I did not imagine I will all my life. And the reality went to the left because these days and the war and the aggression and the bloodshed proved that occupation, settlements, assassination, deportation, power, using much more power, did not bring security to the state of Israel. Israel tried everything, tried all these things that I described, but the one that we are asking, demanding, proposing to try, ending the occupation and have a reconciliation, was not tried, and we are there again now fighting in order to bring people back to their original positions, which is a very tough mission these days. From the Palestinian point of view, this is a real catastrophe. In numbers, it's much more greater than 48 Nakba, what's going in Gaza now. And it's continuing. I am realistic, but I did not imagine that in 2024 or 2023, the world will see killing 30,000 Palestinians, 75 of them are civilians, both children and women, and will continue on. The United States did not condemn even killing of one Palestinian child. Children are children, both when they are Jewish and when they are Palestinians. And any targeting, killing any child should be rejected totally, as we did in the very beginning of the 7th of October. But beside that, the most challenging question, are we going to overcome this difficulty? Because I witnessed wars, battles, rounds in Gaza, but not such an event, continuous event like October the 7th and October 8th, and what's going today. Netanyahu is weaker, or was weaker, and he starting to gain again his Bibi method. He is targeting his base, and I can tell you as a member of the Knesset, there will be no election this year.
Really?
There will be no elections, I think, okay? And they were not able to say this before 2 months. Now they are declaring there will no need for elections. Let's wait for elections at 2026. Or they are even attacking the family of the abductees. They are attacking them. They are creating atmosphere to behave in a hostile way against those who are tackling their politics or their behavior. Palestinian people are used and familiar with disasters, and they know how to heal, but this time it will take very, very long time. About Arab citizens of the State of Israel, Palestinian Israel, it was also very difficult from day one, because they were terrorized by the police and the Attorney General, both coordinating, and arrested hundreds of youth who just published a story or a post with empathy to Palestinian children in Gaza. Immediately they were accused of supporting terror. Or people were forbidden from demonstrating and saying, stop the war. Now it's much more easy or less difficult to say so. The first march against the war in the Arab community was conducted last week only. Because the police banned us from very normal thing when there is a war, to say stop the war. Every Arab who said stop the war, he was accused of supporting Hamas, and it is far from that. If you have empathy with Palestinian families and children, you are not supporting of terror, you are supporting of life. I did not lose my parents like Maoz, but I lost 13 of my family in Gaza. 2 of them are children. One is Ahmad Tibi, 10 years old. The second is Lama, 4 years old. They were killed and they are collateral damage. It's horrible. No one child should be a collateral damage.
Not at all. Not at all.
Thank you.
Moran, tell us about how your world changed on October 7th. previous to that, you'd spent almost the entire previous year on the streets demonstrating against the judicial overhaul, rallying Israeli women, rallying against the government and how it was damaging the rights and the lives of women. How did everything change for you on October 7th? And tell me if you think that, again, Israel has changed, whether temporarily or permanently.
So I think one thing that didn't change is this government is still hurting women's rights and still hurting our democracy. And our agenda as Bonot Alternativa didn't change. We are still here for women leadership. We are still here to protect women's rights and sometimes even women's lives. But Bonot Alternativa is in over 80 cities across Israel. We are over 100,000 women. And on October 7th, very soon after, like right after 6:30 in the morning, we understood the scale of the events because we saw all of our locations, our groups are local, geographical. So we saw everything that's happening because all of the groups were alerting us. So we understood that it's in a very big scale, also in the south. And we did a management conversation in 9 in the morning, and we talked about, and I told them there is no protest anymore. Right now we're shifting everything because we're at war. And for us, it was trivial that this is something that we're doing. You mentioned the emergency centers that we opened all over the country, but we also focused on the denial of the human organization, the women organization, the liberal feminist women around the world that just didn't believe what happened to women and men on October 7th, and ever since. We founded the headquarters for the recognition of Hamas crimes, and we are also separating between Hamas and the Palestinian people. And this is something we are very focused on. 2 days ago, there was the International Women's Day around the world, and we held dozens of demonstrations around the country, but also in over 20 cities around the globe. We have Bonot Alternativa all over the globe as well. And I have to say that they came across with a lot of anti-Semitism. They weren't allowed to join women marches for Women International Day, so they weren't allowed. So there is for us, a lot of things that we're dealing with as well. And I have to say that the agenda for Bonot didn't change. The things that we're doing, so we're not doing the same protest, but we are still very vocal about everything this government doing is like the handing out of guns. Mm-hmm. They're doing it in a way that it's not responsible way. They don't have a plan, they don't have a strategy. Women will be harmed, and children will be harmed from this thing. And I think that this government is still spreading hate. It's not spreading hate just outside, but also between the parts of us in Israel.
Is it difficult for you, the duality of, on one hand, protesting the government inside the country, on the other hand, trying to defend the country in the outside world or promote its interests in terms of the condemnation of the crimes against Israeli women? It's kind of trying to be two things at the same time, right?
So yesterday, the U.S. government said something that they used to say on countries like Iran, that we should separate between the Israeli people and the government. And what I'm doing is for the Israeli men and women and for justice for them. And regardless, we have a government that needs to be replaced because, as Biden said just yesterday, Biden said that Bibi is bad for Israel, is not helping us, is not making us stronger. And I don't believe in these terms of complete winning. And I think that the fact...
Total victory.
Total victory, exactly. And I think that the fact that around the decision-making table, both in the cabinet and in the army, there are only men without any women to balance it, it's part of the problem as well.
I'll turn to you, Ravit. I'm especially interested in member of Knesset Tibi saying so resolutely. There will be no elections in the next year.
I agree.
You agree?
Yeah.
Can you map out the political changes that you've seen develop since October 7th, and maybe a little bit chronologically since the beginning, the middle, and most recently as the war has been playing out?
I will do my best. I think that at the beginning, in the very first weeks, we could see, like Ahmad said, it seemed that everyone moved one octave to the right ideologically, but at the same time, there was also escalation, or everyone moved one scale or octave in criticism the current government, the most ultra-right coalition that has never been created in Israel. So since then, since the shock has been a little bit calmed down, you could see that everyone slowly but surely heading back his political motherland and finded a new justification, relevant circumstances to justify or to possess his own traditional position. You can see it very clearly in the hostages crisis. It had become a real political issue, and the division is very clear. The center and the left wants to bring them back no matter what is the price, even if it includes the end of the war, and as Maoz and Ahmad their opinion, some of the left opposes the war because of other reasons, like the humanitarian, the situation in Gaza, and also, you know, to stop the violence, this enormous violence in our area. On the other hand, the right sees any compromise with Hamas, especially one includes ending the war, not only as a humiliate surrender to Hamas, but also not less than, I think, an existential threat on Israel, just like that. So there is no option to compromise or to give up. I think that Benjamin Netanyahu, that after the October 7th, you could hear members of Knesset, Likud's activists, ministers, said that this guy is finished. I mean, they really said so and believed so. But I think he recognized this situation and offered his own equation. I am the one who is going to lead Israel to the absolute victory on Hamas. I will be the one who will resist the imaginary attempts to force Israel recognizing a Palestinian state. And that equation, I think, enables him to rebirth as the rights leader. Since then, actually, and this is like the conversation or the atmosphere. In the real life, in the real political life, we are now, after 3 years of an enormous instability, political instability, 5 elections, I think that now we have the emergency government, which is the most stable one, according to what I just described. This emergency government, and especially the intimate forum, the cabinet, which runs the war, and also other major issues in Israel, like the policy at the Temple Mount, for example, that hasn't been changed, although or despite strong protests of the original members of the far-right coalition. Okay. And I think that this forum is very stable because of two reasons. The first one, that I think approximately 70 or 80% of the Jewish population in Israel is represented there. Because, imagine a cabinet with 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans. They will hate each other, they won't trust each other, but still they will run the house.
Right.
You know? And the second one, that I think that this forum hasn't been dealt with a real dilemma or test, okay? If we take the members, the most leftist one, ex-chief of staff Gadi Eisenkot, and the most rightist there, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, actually the gap is not so big. I mean, they do things, and this is like the position of the General Security Service and the intelligence organization and the IDF, that the reason there is no exchange deal, hostages exchange is because Hamas and not because Israel, for example. And some of the American administration think so. So you don't have a real conflict here, okay, that can, I don't know, storm this, or you know, divide this cabinet. So that's the situation for now here in Israel. So
and yet you have this extreme right-wing larger cabinet. I mean, you've got that contrast, right? About the war cabinet reflecting Israel and...
I think that this is more atmosphere than real, okay, influence on reality. In reality, I think that the cabinet is very dominant, actually is the most dominant. And it's not exactly a leftist cabinet, you know. So this is the policy right now.
But in terms of the general trends, I've heard theories that, yes, Israel is taking a giant step to the right. They may not like Netanyahu, but the war has made Israelis, and Ahmed said the same. He said that it's going to be hard to move them back. But
the Jewish public wants right solution, but don't want to get them from the current rights representatives.
Then there's other theories I've heard about general sobering up on the right and the left in coalescing around a more centrist view that would rally around a Benny Gantz type figure.
I hope so. This is like the good, the good narrative or the good option. I'm not sure it will happen, but I hope so.
Yeah. Maoz, what do you think? Yeah.
I don't want to speak about politics.
Okay.
But I would say just that. We lost on October the 7th. We lost. And ever since, we keep losing. It's not the ultimate win, it's the ultimate losing. There is an inside security strip inside in Israel, with the border with Gaza and the border with Lebanon. And it's going on for over than 5 months. It's the ultimate loss that Israel ever experienced. And it's similar to October War, the Yom Kippur War. And the next election after the war, Golda won major victory. But it took 4 years from October War to President Sadat to visit Israel. And it was a historical visit. Till this visit, 60% of the Israeli public were against the negotiation, not against the signing the accord. And Menachem Begin from the right, and this is the right. Peace is not left or right. Menachem Begin said, we can prevent the war, but we cannot prevent the peace. And only 2 years after, the peace accord with Egypt was signed. And this is the most safe and secure border we have with Jordan. So the only way to bring security and safety to the people of Israel is only by political agreement and solution. And I want to take you to the lesson I learned since October the 7th. And I spoke to so many Palestinians and Palestinians within Israel and from the international community. And it's something that we Israelis don't understand. Our stories were split in the holy books with the different chosen sons, Ismael and Isaac. And since then, it's not parallel, but the stories, the gap between the stories is getting wider and wider as we are reaching the present. Through the Zionist movement, and the Palestinian national movement, the story got wider. And all the war we've been waging on each other, and October the 7th, and what's happening now in Gaza, the stories were never wide as before. But there is a miracle. There is a miracle because when I speak to so many Palestinians, including those who lost close family members in Gaza, and I meet them now on daily basis, we meet in the future. The future is the key, and we need to look to this future. Imagine it. We lost using our political imagination. We lost this ability. We must use it. And not Gantz, and not Eisenkot, and not Yair Golan. No one is using it. This is why there is going to be no election, because they are offering us the same ongoing conflict and the same ongoing war. So we must use this imagination. And we meet in the future, and this future can be very nearby. It can be 4 to 6 years. And this future both for Palestinian and Israelis that will be based on equality, on reconciliation, on justice, and of course, security and safety. And me and my family and our community heard so many times that we revenge for what Hamas has done in so many wars in the last 2 decades, and that Hamas lost its military ability. And that so many times we heard that there is we brought security for the communities in the envelope of Gaza, and we don't believe them anymore. The only way to bring security and safety is political solution. And no one in the political map, the players now, is offering that. And this is why if there will be election or won't be election, it's not important, it's not relevant. We need to build this future because they lost the ability to do so. So it's going to be new leaders. Like no one would be able to imagine in '73 that the prime minister who will welcome President Sadat is not going to be Golda, it's not going to be Rabin, it's not going to be Shimon Peretz, it's going to be the everlasting opposition member, Menachem Begin. So let's bring Menachem Begin legacy back. Let's bring the legacy of peace and hope back to the table, back to real politics, and not just for dreamer like myself. But I'm not just a dreamer. I have a plan, and I'm not alone. There are many, many, many of us that are working now on the ground, Palestinian, Israelis, with international community to execute a roadmap for peace.
Ahmed, do you believe that October 7th could be Yom Kippur in terms of changing things maybe geopolitically permanently in the area, bringing Israel? You look skeptical to me.
Again, like Golda.
Like Golda.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the main reason why reasonable Israelis are willing to have election tomorrow is to move Benjamin Netanyahu, not to have a peace or reconciliation or a compromise. Only to move Benjamin Netanyahu and this government, which is described truly as a failure government, bloody government, but the conflict will continue because, look, Benny Gantz, who is the candidate to replace Benjamin Netanyahu, did not say ever Palestinian state. Netanyahu did. Benny Gantz did not. Ever. Second, what's the difference between Benny Gantz and Netanyahu during this war? Can somebody tell what's the difference between both? Even Gantz, he was the one who intimidated the Palestinians that even in Ramadan, we will attack Rafah in a special video that he presented. That's to say, the Israeli politics is united to continue the war, not Lapid. Lapid said that war should be ended with exchange of abductees and prisoners. Gantz did not say so. Okay? Netanyahu is willing to elongate and to expand the war forever because it depends upon his political survival. If the war will stop, huge demonstration will be there in all the streets of Israel demanding Benjamin Netanyahu to leave. And he is not willing to see that. That's why he is postponing and putting obstacle in any deal about the abductees and the prisoners.
Mm-hmm. Moran, I want to know what you think of what they've said, and also just, you run a grassroots organization. You're speaking with everyday Israelis. You're not up giving speeches or thinking about grand political solutions. From your perspective, I mean, so many of the fights that you've been focused on over the past year in terms of, social issues and improving life for Israeli women have been buried, under the shadow, under the cloud of the war. So I'm interested in your perspective about how people are talking about the political situation, if they're talking about the political situation, or if they're trying to figure out how to get through their day and their week.
So I think it's a mix of everything you just said. I think a lot of Israelis, also my family, our heart was broken on October 7th, and some of us are just trying to make it day by day. We have babies that their father is in the army and their mothers have nothing to feed them in Israel. And this is indeed a failing government. And I do understand, from one hand, what you're talking about. The Israeli people are taking to the right a bit, but I think also that the constant conflict and bringing us one against each other is something that we are tired of. And even my brother, that is like far right, he said, I don't want these extremes from both sides, even though I don't think you can compare the extremes from the right side. I don't see the left. I don't see any extreme in the left. But people do want the center, and they do want us to be united together, but not in a cynical way, the way the government is meaning. And this is really our mission. And our mission is to keep Israel a democracy. And as I said, this government is doing everything she can, including violence, against all civilians, also Jewish, Israeli civilians, against protesters, and
who are back in the streets now in large numbers. Yeah,
exactly. So she's doing everything in her power, from one hand to say, no, this is not the time, but from the other hand, it's becoming very violent against its own people.
We are coming to generally the close of our panel. I want to go around one time, and if you could each just tell me maybe what is the greatest lesson that you hope Israel will take away from the terrible tragedy of October 7th and its aftermath. You could also share your greatest fear, but since we like to end these things on an optimistic note, I'm also interested in what you really hope Israel has learned from this experience, that it can move forward into the future. I'll go around and start with you, Ravit.
I think that this atrocity should merit people to understand that two people, by the way, Palestinian and Jews. If we don't learn to share this land in a better way, reconciliation, compromise, acknowledge each other's pains and fears and narratives, then we are going just like to a Balkanian destiny, or even Rwanda. I have all kind of horrible places and horrible pieces of history. Mm-hmm. That's it. I mean, that's the lesson of October the 7th. I mean, and I can't understand how we can think that we can, keep living the way we did without changing something very basic, which is more like mental and emotional, and the way we see and experience reality. That's what I think.
Moran?
I think that the lesson that we haven't learned yet, but I hope we will, is that we can't only depend on our military power, and you can't just fight fire with fire constantly. And I think that the fact that this government has no plan for what to do with Gaza, and if we won't do anything right now, we will find ourselves in another cycle like we did in Lebanon. And I think this is what this government is aiming for. And we can't take responsibility for the Gaza civilians. We can't. But there is no strategy, and everything is just for the leader to stay in power. They're not building any strategy at all. And I really hoped that the big failure of October 7th will make them understand that we need to have a plan. And I hope that the Israeli people understand, even though we are all hurt and angry, that we need to have a common plan together, and this government will not provide this plan.
Member of Knesset Tibi, if you have some form of hope for a lesson that Israel's leaders and citizens have learned from this experience, what is that lesson?
I think both sides should act in order to have value of life much more than the value of death. Both nations deserve that. It depends also on leadership, but I hope Israeli leadership will apprehend that what did not work with force will not work with much more force and power, and that both sides are here in order to stay, and neither will annihilate the other side. Ending occupation and Palestine alongside the State of Israel is possible and even is must.
Yeah, I cannot agree more. What I would only say and add, I'm meeting in the recent weeks with Palestinians from Gaza, from the occupied territories, with young leaders from Lebanon, from Jordan, from Egypt, the Gulf, and North Africa. And they are sharing the same messages that the three of you just shared. Okay? And we have partners, we have strong allies in all those countries and nations. And we can make this war to the last war. It must be the last war, and it's in our hands to push and leverage our leaders and the international community to make it the last war of the Middle East.
You have all been amazing, fascinating panel members. I would like to thank you all, Member of Knesset Ahmad Tibi, Maoz Inon, Moran Zer Katzenstein, and my colleague Ravit Hecht. Thank you so much, and thank you to our audience for having the time and listening to what you all have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.